Hey there, welcome to saas.unbound podcast. I'm your host, I'm Nadeina, head of growth at saas.group, serial acquirer buying wonderful SaaS businesses to take them to the next level. And here I chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. So today with me are Wolfgang and Zoltan, co-founders of Eversync, a platform that monitors and automates business operations. And very unusual setup. I almost never do, and almost never have two co-founders in one place, but great to see you here, guys. Welcome.
Yeah, great to meet everyone. Yeah.
Welcome. Hi there.
Okay, awesome. So before we go into the story, and again, this is going to be a bit of an unusual story on the podcast, but I think so important to highlight. Let's start with your backgrounds, maybe. Zoltan, want to go first?
Yeah, very happy to. So I have a combination of business and product background. I started my career in consulting at McKinsey. That's where actually I met with Wolfgang, where we worked together. And there I worked with technology companies mostly and on digital transformation topics. And then I joined actually another holding company in the food delivery industry, Delivery Hero, where I was the managing director of the Hungarian entity for 2.5 years, growing the business from 100 to 400 employees, 5 million to 50 million revenues. And then, based on some insights and challenges that I have seen at Delivery Hero, founded Eversync with Wolfgang, and we have been working on it for more than 2 years. Raised more than 3 million euros in funding, but still, despite having quite a lot of runway left, decided to shut down a few months ago. And yeah, we will tell more about that story later on.
Yeah, thank you. Wolfgang?
Quick intro on my side. As Ollie already mentioned, we've met at McKinsey. Started out my career there for the first 7 years, then decided to build my first business, which was also a B2B SaaS business that I scaled to a team of around about 70 people. It was called Sixfold, and we're doing supply chain visibility. Finished that with an exit, so that was a success story, and as such, got inspired and I would say more and more excited about being an entrepreneur and built two more businesses. And yeah, the last one, Solly already mentioned, was Eversync, which we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. And well, I gave a quick intro, but it would be great to actually get a bit more about what you guys were building and what exactly was the problem, Zoe, that you saw at Delivery Hero that desperately needed to be solved.
Yeah, I'm very happy to tell you more about it. So, yeah, everything, as Anna already mentioned briefly, was a business operations monitoring and automation software, a traditional B2B SaaS product. The idea came from the fact that when I was working at Delivery Hero as a managing director, one of my core objectives was not only, increasing growth and profitability, but also to provide amazing customer experience. And what I have seen there is that we have so many customer issues that we could have identified in advance based on all the data that we had, and we still couldn't. For instance, we could have identified in advance that on the next day we won't have enough delivery riders in a particular zone, and therefore there will be a lot of delays and a lot of customer issues. Or we could have identified in advance that there is a certain vendor that should be open but is not open, and therefore they are losing orders. And there were like really tons of these examples where we were losing money and also causing a really bad customer experience. I was also representing the European market in the global product prioritization meetings, and we always brought a lot of ideas how to, make operations more proactive and automated. But somehow these requests were never prioritized because they were not directly revenue generating, customer facing, but more like a lot of smaller improvements in the day-to-day operations. And that's where the idea came that if there is a requirement from the business operations teams to make their life better in a way that they can automate a lot of their processes, they can become more proactive, but they can't do that, then let's build a software that provides them a no-code technology where they can actually set up all of these proactive monitors and automations without having to involve the developer. So that's how the idea came. And right away, when I saw the opportunity, I started talking to a few friends who were working at similarly operations heavy industries, micromobility, ride sharing, food delivery, e-commerce. You can name a lot of these operationally complex businesses. And turned out that they really felt the same pain. So that was the starting point. What I would highlight here is that I think everyone who has already built a startup or is considering building a startup knows that this is a high risk, high reward game. And we really thought about, okay, how to mitigate all the risks when starting the business. Of course, you can't mitigate everything, but you can try to lower. And one way to do that was that actually we involved some investors already from the very beginning. So we tried to involve a pre-seed investor, and not necessarily for the money, but actually to help us to validate the idea via their network, and B, also using the initial funding that lots of startups don't have in the beginning, to build a product with a great team very quickly so that we can be on the market quickly and get feedback. So that's how we started. And our pre-seed investor, Picus Capital, helped us, validate the idea by also conducting interviews. So we spoke to 40, 50 different businesses to see if the pain point exists. Then we raised 900,000 euros right in the beginning, hired 3 developers, built product in 3 months, and had a paying customer already in the 4th month. So everything started super ideally. And then, of course, as usually in startups, the path is not so smooth anymore.
All right, well, let's get there. I mean, it seems like you had the pain yourself. You validated it with the interviews. Were there any surprises while you were validating? Like maybe like you said, you were building a no code solution, so there is less friction for the users. Was the user the same persona as the buyer?
Yes, the user and the buyer were the same personas. However, as it turned out, you needed another persona in the implementation phase. You still needed the technology persona, tech or data person, to connect the database or the data warehouse. So you ask, like, okay, were there any surprises? I would say, like, the first surprises came when we started to implement or get the first customers and implement the solution, because it turned out that when you have uh, multiple personas in the onboarding flow, then it really gets hard. So that's one key learning for me retrospectively, that like try to find a solution where one persona is the buyer, the user, and then can also implement the business in a as smooth way as possible. So that was one challenge. The other challenge was also, it turned out that data was not that structured as we expected. So we always heard that there is a trend that everyone is moving their data into data warehouses, into a single place, and that was one trend we tried to capitalize on, so that you don't need to integrate via APIs different software, but we just connect to the data warehouse, and then we get all the data from a single place. Again, turned out it's not so simple. Data warehouses are not so uh, clean in terms of data, not so structured, so we couldn't always utilize everything there. And I think one other key learning for us was also the urgency of the problem was not as high as we expected. And I mean, you may ask why. I think there was one reason that we could have identified already earlier during the interviews, and one reason that was a bit market dependent. The first reason, we realized that operations is not on the top of the mind of the CEO or the managing directors, because it's not directly revenue generating. So now, if I would start another startup, I would definitely find the pain point where it's about revenue, because it's always 10 times more important than decreasing costs or increasing customer experience. That's something that we could have realized earlier, maybe by not only having interviews within our or the investors network, but by, I don't know, having paid interviews already from the beginning, than to have people who are really not incentivized to be nice to us, but just to answer honestly, or by trying to do some consulting projects in the beginning to really see how urgent it is to fix this pain point. So that's something that we could have, done better. And then there also was a market element, because when we started the business, it was still, the low interest rate, high growth area with a lot of VC funding. So all of these ops heavy companies were growing quickly. And hence, by the way, operations was a blocker in the growth. But then, right after we started, the Ukrainian war, broke out, interest rates increased, and all the ops heavy businesses, they started to, stall or even decrease in growth. And then operations was not anymore a blocker, and everyone was really paying attention to, okay, how can we grow again, and not operations. So that was also one thing that happened that was more market dependent.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I was reading this story because you guys are super transparent about it, and yeah, if you're listening, like, if you want to get even more insights into the story, go to both Zoltan and Wolfgan's LinkedIn and read the story. It's all there. But yeah, you were talking about different hypotheses that you were trying while you were building, and how you were kind of disproving them one after another. And while I was reading, my biggest question was kind of, you being on the market for just a couple of years, were you actually like giving enough time to it to like disprove something, or was there a bit of pressure involved because you raised funds to kind of go to that, find your product market fit so much faster that maybe you were not focusing? Sorry, I'm being very blunt here, but tell me more.
No, I think very, very fair question, but I think the important piece, and Sultan already talked a bit about it, is, and you mentioned also learnings. I mean, when you're building a startup, when you're an entrepreneur, I think you're playing against the odds. In the end, data tells us you're more likely than not gonna succeed. You're more likely than not gonna build the next unicorn. That's just a pure matter of fact. And as such, as an entrepreneur, you need to be crazy convicted and focused on what you want to do. You need to uh, treat this as your baby, work very, very hard, sleep little, and have all the passion to make sure that you're driving it forward. By definition, you need to be irrational rather than rational when doing this. And I think, secondly, when you're building a business, like, it's something new, it's something unusual. You don't have structure. So, like, hey, there's a clear playbook, there's a clear path. Like, you're trying to figure this out as you go. I think both of these elements just uh, drive you, or drove at least us, to make sure that we're approaching this very rational and factual, and that we're approaching it hypothesis driven. That we always do stuff because we want to test something that we strongly believe in. We want to clearly define, okay, we have this hypothesis, we have that hypothesis. Let's do something to work it out, to test it, whether it's right or wrong. So they're not just stumbling in the dark, doing quote unquote random things and trying it out, but that you're very clear on what you believe, what is your underlying core belief, what do you want to test, and what do you do in order to figure out whether you're right or not. And we've been doing this, I think, from the very beginning, and there are some very large, generic, big hypotheses, as those that we've mentioned in the blog post that you just referenced, where we have the underlying belief this needs to be true for the business to be successful. And other than that, we have had, I don't know, tens, hundreds of quote unquote smaller hypotheses, like the hypothesis which market to go after in terms of geography, in terms of industry, the hypothesis on the persona. And all of these things are, I think, just clear things that we spelled out and said, now we believe this, and now we'll test it to figure out whether it's right or not. And yes, you're referencing to, okay, do we have enough time to figure out whether it's right or not? I think for some of these things, you need to, what I would call, time box yourself. Of course, you could always like spell it out one way and then try around a bit to the left and see, oh no, it doesn't quite work. Tweak it a bit, try around a bit to the right. But think, like, to some extent, you're fooling yourself if you're always just turning 10% left, turning 20% right, testing something here or there. So for us, we set out to say, okay, we want to test these core hypotheses. And as soon as we gathered data that like clearly over time showed us, look, whatever we do, it's just not a fact that the operations monitoring is really a painkiller that everybody needs. It turned out to be more of a vitamin. So once we've had that realization, we felt we would only be fooling ourselves. We would only be fooling our investors, our customers, our teams if we now said, well, let's try a bit here, let's try a bit there. And as such, I think we came to the painful conclusion that we've laid out in a blog post that we've discussed, that it was the better choice to wind down the company. However, I think one thing that is still very important to say, we've been pivoting, I don't know, a couple of times on the problem that we're solving, on the persona that we're solving. So of course there are, it might now look crystal clear. We set out a plan at the beginning. We realized that plan is not good. We stopped. That's of course not the case. Like we had a very clear set of underlying hypotheses. We've been trying around how to solve those, or what exactly to do, whom exactly to solve the problem for. But we've seen that in that space, even with pivoting a bit left and right, with seeing that the problem is there, but it might be solved differently, just over time, nothing in regards to those core hypotheses changed. And as such, we felt it was in the best interest of everyone that we call it quits, despite having about 18 months of runway left.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, thank you for elaborating. I want to come back to something Zoltan said earlier, because you started working with investors, and there was something you said. I think it was, next time we build something, we may need to find people to go to and validate this idea who are less incentivized to tell us the good stuff about the product, but rather just give us an honest opinion. And I think it's such a core problem in validation of many products out there, because people are, well, not trained to tell you that you suck or your idea sucks, because we also want to be mindful of what we're telling people. But also sometimes you just frankly don't go to the right people, and they don't know what there should be, or what they would want this to look like. So after validating an idea, granted, maybe those were not the best people to validate it with. When you actually started building, how was the customer communication? How were you tweaking the product because of it? So were you working closer to the customer once, everything started, or, maybe walk me through the process a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that at the end of the day, building a product and putting it out there in the market is always better than optimizing interviews. On the other hand, you still want to do interviews because it's just much faster way. This is the much faster way to get feedback initially, until you are at least building the first version of the MVP. So this was actually an iterative process where, when we had a new hypothesis and the new pivot direction, we always, started scheduling some interviews to get early feedback while we were building, the next version of the product that we could then release, and then see the actual feedback from the market. On the interview side, as you said, we realized we had to find people who are not incentivized to be nice to us. So after a while, we started just pay for interviews. So there are different, user interview websites out there who can recruit people for you with specific profiles. Or you can, and what we have also done is we reached out on LinkedIn to random people, but offering money. And we really define what is the persona that we want to target for the interviews. And by the way, this is also a great way to get customers, because at the end of the interviews, if they were speaking about a pain point that, was relevant for them, we could say at the very end that, by the way, we are building a solution that tries to tackle that. Would you be interested in a demo in a different call? And then actually that helped us a lot, instead of being very direct, directly selling, the product without, having any discussion. So that was the interview side. And then next to that, we had, the first customers. And there we made sure that we work very closely with them. and see how they are using the product, what are their challenges in the day-to-day operations that we may be able to solve. We even visited them in person, even though we had customers from all over the world, so we had to fly there and then sit with them, and that provided very, very useful advice and insights. So yeah, that was kind of the process. We had to use both the interviews and the actual customer feedback. And besides that, what Wolfgang mentioned already briefly, when we set up this hypothesis, we also set up how to test this hypothesis. And of course, one thing was to deliver the product and see how customers are utilizing that. But for instance, another way to test the hypothesis is setting up different cold outreach sequences for different customer targets with different messaging, and for instance see what is the difference in the response rate. That can already give you some early insight, are you in the right direction or not. So that was also one way to test very quickly if something is working or not.
I quickly wanted to jump in and add on the interview part, because when you asked the question, Anna, was more about like, okay, quote unquote, were the folks who we interviewed too nice to us? And Zoltan also elaborated a bit on that. I think one crucial piece that we didn't touch enough there was what Solly mentioned in the very beginning, is also that we had basically three different personas who needed to be involved. Like the buyer, the user, and the persona required for integration were all different personas. I think that to some extent was also a bit of the trouble with the validation, because very often when we talk to the person who had the problem, they agreed. They said, I have that problem. Yes, I need that problem solved. So I think we heard a lot of that. We got a lot of feedback that, yes, it is a problem. But what we only uncovered later on when trying to solve the problem was that it takes a lot of effort for them to internally convince someone to be able to pay money for it. And it takes a lot of effort for them to internally convince someone to help them to do the integration. Because the persona that we targeted was like an operations manager, but the operations manager needed someone in the data slash engineering team to do the onboarding, and they needed someone mostly in finance or some superior of theirs to pay for it. So I think that was the detail that we didn't quite get out in the interview, because we got confirmation, we got people who said like, yes, I really need what you're building, but it was a bit too, it seemed too easy, and a lot of the trouble only came, and that also closes the loop to what Solly said before, once we had a product and they tried the product. Because once they tried it out, once we onboarded, once we worked with them, we realized, yes, after jumping through all these hoops, it provides value for them, but it's quite some effort to jump through these hoops. So in retrospect, I think when thinking about the validation as a whole, if you identify that you have multiple personas, it's also really crucial to try to look at all of the different personas and to try to understand, okay, do those other personas who actually not necessarily benefiting from your solution, who only have work or have some say, how do you get those involved? I think that is something that is very crucial. Assuming that you're building a business that is relying on multiple personas, because as Solly said before, ideally focus on one, who's your buyer and decision maker and user. That's the easiest, but life is not always easy. So if you have multiple, make sure validation covers all of those.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I wanted to tell me a little bit more about the business model that you eventually ended up with, and how you found out that it may not have been the most sustainable one.
Yeah. So we started with a very simple pricing, because we didn't want to, like go into the details of how to optimize pricing until we figured out, what should be the actual product for which persona. And it was, a pricing model where we charge our customers around between 500 and 1,000 euros per month. So our ACV was around 8,000 euros for all of our customers. And there is this general rule of thumb in SaaS that you either go for much lower pricing, but then you can access a lot of customers, or you go for much higher pay, like pricing, and then you have the enterprise model, and then everything in between is a death of Wally, and we knew that from the very beginning. But it's also very difficult, if you don't want to start with the low pricing and product-led growth motion, it's very difficult to start right away with the enterprise model where you already charge $1 million or $500,000 per year, while you still hardly have a product. So our initial idea was that we start with somewhere in the middle. We had the first customers who were SMBs, but with 2, 3, 400 employees, where the operations was already complex enough to have a lot of troubles, but they didn't have enough capacity to solve it internally. And our original idea was that we will grow slowly to higher pricing and the enterprise segment. And we started with that. What we realized, however, during our journey is that the pain point was not big enough. We already felt that with the struggle of onboarding. If the pain point is big enough, then even if you have 3, 4, 5 personas in the implementation journey, they will make their work, because then that 1-2 person who really feels that pain will make sure that everything is there. So that was one thing that we started to feel. And the second thing that we realized when we broke down the value that we were delivering to our existing customers, it turned out that just by definition how operations is, it is added up from a lot of different smaller pieces. So it's not that one part of our product delivers a huge value, but they monitored and automated dozens or even hundreds of different kinds of incidents. And all of these different workflows require separate implementation, which by definition meant that when we start to implement the product, it's not that we right away deliver a huge ROI, but actually we bring small value, then they see the value, and then they build up on top of that. And that was the first realization that, wait, this enterprise sales-led model probably will never work, because customers more and more require a very quick return on investment. They want not only high return of investment, but they want it right away, especially in the current market. As everyone knows, it's not that easy to sell SaaS products. So we realized that if this is the nature of business operations and the product, we will never be able to charge 100,000 euros and or even more per customer. So then we started to see, okay, what can we do? And then we said, okay, maybe then the solution is to go more to the product-led growth direction and to have more customers at a lower price point. And then we started to think, okay, but what do we need for that? Again, as Wolfgang mentioned in the beginning, like we always had this hypothesis, and then what do we need to believe in to make that work? And one example was that we need to believe in that the user, we can find an ICP, an industry, and some use cases where the user can be the same person as the buyer and can be the same person as the implementator and the integrator. And because otherwise it requires a lot of sales process, and we can't automate it. That would be a requirement for product-led growth. So in the last few months we were testing this direction. We went, by the way, towards e-commerce customers where the data was not in a custom database, but in readily available third-party applications like Shopify, eBay, Amazon, etc. We started integrating with those. We started to offer, workflow templates so that they can get started very quickly. So we started to implement all the things that are rather required for the product-led growth direction. And then what we realized there, that we still had different like touch points in the customer journey that we couldn't automate. And unless you can fully automate the customer journey, again, it doesn't make sense to do the product-led growth model, because it won't be sustainable in the long term. So we looked at, okay, what are the touch points and what do we need to automate even those touch points? And we started using AI, for instance, to see how we can automate those touch points. We started to see, okay, can we, for instance, utilize AI to explain what a customer wants, find the right data point in the underlying data in Shopify, and then at least create a draft code for the workflow that they want. And then again, we soon realized that this is again not doable. And it's not doable because of technology, because the technology is not there, but it's not doable because our customers still required consulting and hand-holding. And that was the biggest problem, because if it would be only the technology is not there, then maybe we say, yeah, look at how quickly AI is evolving, maybe we just give it one more year and the technology will be there. But no, the problem was not that. We saw that even if AI will be there, for instance, to automate all these like manual steps in the process, we still need to handhold our customers and then consult them. Okay, what is your problem in operations? Where is your data? What to connect? What do you really want to do with the incidents, etc.? And then we realize again, even that direction is not sustainable. So that's just to give some insights into our thinking, how we went through the different business model options, and why at the end we said, look, it's not sustainable at the end of the day. We tried both the enterprise sales led direction and also the SMB focused product led growth direction, and none of them works.
Okay, that's a lot of experiments. I mean, yeah, it looks like you guys have tried quite a few things. That's fascinating. I think this is like there are so many learnings for the founders that are trying to break into one or the other. But yeah, well, obviously you decided to sunset the project, but you have investors and you have customers, and I'm always and you still have runway, right? What is it, like year and a half still left?
Yeah.
And how does it work, like for investors? How do you navigate this relationship? Because well, we all talk about investors trying to always get their money's worth, right? So was there any like pressure to continue to actually try maybe something else, hire somebody else? I don't know, not all the experiments you went through, maybe there is still some left. Yeah, how do you navigate this, and how is it going right now for you with the investors and all the stakeholders
Mm-hmm.
involved?
Yeah.
Maybe before jumping direct into the question, I want to add something, because I realized when you asked the question now that also earlier on, when you asked about the hypothesis and whether we want to, whether we were quote unquote rushing to shut down, whether it was driven also by the fact that we have investors, and I didn't quite touch base on that. I think that the important piece there is that I don't think whether the fact that we've had investors or versus if we would have bootstrapped it, that it made any difference in how quickly we came to the conclusion. Because I think in the end, we just wanted to be and always were super, super transparent towards our investors and how things are going. And they were also super, super supportive and provided whatever help and support we needed. And at least to my perception, didn't provide any necessary pressure or anything. So I think from that angle, in whether we've come to that conclusion earlier or later, I don't think that necessarily wasn't too much of a difference. I would rather say that, of course, the funding allowed us to be much more sophisticated in our approach because we've built the product and whatnot. But I think we didn't necessarily get any additional time pressure to find product market fit sooner or later because of the fact that we've had investors. Because I think, after all, both Solly and I are very passionate and eager folks, always wanted to quote unquote get to the goal line first. So I think as such that hasn't necessarily changed anything. But I don't know, Solly, what do you want to
Yeah.
get
And
more into the
Yeah.
details?
regarding the sustainability of the business, I was also asked by a few colleagues and also other entrepreneurs, like, if you don't have VC funding, like, could you have like made the business model sustainable? And actually, yes, because like, as I said, the entire like business required a lot of consulting and implementation. So actually, it could have been a nice bootstrapped custom software development and consulting business targeting business operations use cases. It could have been a business like that, but we didn't want to build such a business in Wolfgang, but we had higher aspirations and big ambitions to build a big business with high impact on on the entire world and on the customers. With VC funding behind us, like it was also not possible to change to that direction anymore. Now coming to the customers, yeah, transparency and honesty we believe are key. During the entire process, we were super transparent with our investors. We send them monthly email updates with all the key learnings, all the new hypotheses that we want to test. We were continuously in touch with them via WhatsApp, via phone calls. So when we decided that okay, we want to shut down, like on the one hand side, they were surprised that we don't want to continue and test new pivot directions. On the other hand, they also understood that what we are building now is not sustainable and doesn't work. So they were fully appreciative of that, because they already followed through all of our learnings and what we have built. Now they were asking in the beginning, but don't you want to pivot to something completely different, because you have still funding, you have the team. And we also explained that we believe in these so-called hard pivots only if the idea is coming from one of the two possibilities, which is one, when you were talking to a lot of customers, you identified a completely new pain point that is really repetitive and big. Unfortunately, we didn't, even though we tried to find that. Or you are building something internally for your own like product development processes that then you try to then productize afterwards. And again, we looked into our software. Do we have anything that we could just separate and then productize and market? We didn't have anything. So the only remaining option would have been to try our luck and randomly guess what we want to do. And as Wolfgang said, like, it's just against the odds. Even if you have founder market fit, even if you have a network in an industry to get the first customers, it's very, very difficult to build a startup. So we just didn't want to spend investor money and also, or neither our and our team's time on something where we knew that chances are super, super low that we will find something. So after we explained that to the investors, they understood, and then they were again super supportive in the process that we want to shut down, and actually appreciated our thinking process and objective decision.
That's awesome. That actually looks like, you have a great team of investors, who weren't rushing you into anything, but also didn't want to pressure you into like going until the very end. How about the team? Like, how did you navigate this relationship? Because I mean, not every, I know that we kind of focused on shutting down the company during this episode, but not everything went wrong, right? You've built a product, and you have the team, and you've had customers, so something went right. And I want to kind of know how the team took it, and what's going on with them now.
Yeah, so I think first of all, if you talk about the team, or let's maybe extend it and say that the team and our customers, of course, that part was probably one of the emotionally hardest parts of this entire journey, to go to them and tell them, look, we're gonna shut down, because after all, whether you look at a team, whether you look at customers, they've believed in us. They believed in the journey that we've taken them on. We kind of convinced them, because as an early stage startup, you've got nothing to show but the vision that you lay out as founders and the trust that you inspire as founders. And as such, it was of course pretty hard to go and face them with that news. At the very same time, I think what you've just said is like a very important part of the entire story, that our team, like, they didn't really do anything wrong. They built an amazing product. The issue was more or less the market fit wasn't necessarily there, but our team helped us to build something, to pivot multiple times, to do further iterations, to add additional features that were all really solid and stellar. They were all amazing. But as mentioned, it was more the dynamic of the business model and the dynamic that we were facing multiple personas that it didn't quite work out. So I think honing in on that and really clearly communicating that to the team was a very important part to approach them and say, like, look, in the end, none of you guys and gals has quote unquote failed. You've built something that was amazing. It's just that the business model doesn't scale. So if there is anyone to blame, it's rather us as founders, it's Solly and I, rather than the team, because they have done a very, very stellar job. And on top of that, I think the second part that, of course, also added to them being able to digest the news was that, similar to what Saudi said with the investors, we were always super transparent. Everyone in the team knew the numbers. They knew the customers that were signing up. They knew our revenue. They knew our runway. Everything was always transparent. So as such, they of course understood that we were not on the trajectory to become a decathlon next week. And they could, of course, to some extent understand. It was a bit tricky to make it clear, okay, so why are we shutting down if there's still runway for 12 to 18 months left? Because there were, of course, some who would have wanted to continue, because I think we've built a pretty amazing environment. It was a really cool group of people, smart, driven, fun. So all of that was there. But I think after we've laid out also what Solly just explained towards the investors, they were all very rational and understanding. So there was probably still like a bit of a crying eye, because emotionally it's not necessarily easy news. But in the end, I think they all very well understood why we have taken that decision. And on the other hand, you also ask about what's the future for them now, since we've built a pretty stellar team. As of today, I think everyone in the team is working on the next project, on the next startup, working in a big organization, depending on the individual profile. So they all have found a new home by now, because all of them are pretty amazing and such deserve that. But and to pivot a bit also to the customer side, I think it was similarly, as mentioned before, emotionally tricky to communicate it to customers, because after all, we've been selling them on our vision. We've been providing them with our product. Most of them were super excited and happy with the product. Unfortunate thing is they didn't pay enough money for it. That was maybe the dilemma. But we've also, similar to what Soli explained with investors, and I just also explained with the team, we just very rationally told them in one-on-one conversations or in VCs, phone calls, etc., in a personal manner, not just sending an email, hey, we're sunsetting this, but really taking the time to explain the news. I think that all of them were understanding. The vast majority of them were sad and of course would have liked to continue using the product, but as we have explained, it's just business model wise wasn't necessarily scalable for us. But I think the coherent story across all those other stakeholder groups that is important is to be transparent, upfront, and very factual. And I think with that, everybody was very, very understanding.
Just one
Yeah.
like minor point to add. I think founders need to realize that there is an alternative cost not only to themselves but also to the employees. Because if you want to build a successful startup, by definition, you hire amazing people who could, work in a lot of different companies. And in a startup, again, by definition, you give them a below market rate or slightly below market rate salary, where the upside is coming from the hope that this will be a large company later on. So as soon as you don't believe, you don't have the conviction as a founder, you also do better for the team to actually close it down earlier so that they can then focus on the next startup or go to work somewhere else for higher salary as soon as possible, even if it seems to be tough for them in the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just we talked to Wolfgan once before, but just having you both here, rational is like the best word to describe it. Like, I mean, this is a very emotional journey, and I mean, like you said, it's growing your baby, it's believing in it and making so many other people believe in it. But I don't think I've ever heard a story that was about this, about making a conscious decision to just sunset everything early, to give people also an alternative to go and be somewhere else, to maybe feel better about what they've built without just trying to run them into a wall eventually, when, well, this is definitely not going to work. So thanks for sharing that. I just have, a couple more questions because, as I mentioned before, and you backed me up on this, not everything went wrong. So let's start with a win. What so far for Eversync? What has been the biggest win?
Biggest win. I would say the team, definitely. As Wolfgang mentioned, we could build an amazing team, and then if we would, figure out a new pain point and build a startup again, it would be, if possible, clearly be the same team. And secondly, I would also highlight how hypothesis driven and how quick we were in the iterations. I think there we couldn't have done anything better. Or maybe, of course, you can always improve, but I think we did really well. So these are the two things that I would highlight.
Very much agree. Let me add to the first one with the team also that we didn't discuss this yet, and I guess Anna with SaaS Group, you guys are experts at that. But we've also built a remote first company, so we were spread across all of Europe. We, I don't know, met once a quarter for, I would say, on the one hand side laying out our vision, on the other hand side also having fun, and quote unquote, despite being physically very far apart most of the time, we've built a really cohesive team that not only developed something or not only managed to achieve great results, but we've also very much enjoyed working together and inspired ourselves. So I think that that was also certainly a big win and takeaway for me to learn, even if you put together a quote unquote bunch of strangers from very different places in the world, that you can still build an amazing and cohesive team. And to add one more thing to what Sally said in terms of the wins, I think also that we've managed to commercialize the product pretty early on. So yes, we've discussed how the business model wasn't necessarily sustainable, but the first money in, the number of customers that we've gotten, etc., I think was quite a success because we've seen there were plenty of businesses who were willing to pay. I think what just didn't necessarily match was the willingness to pay, the amount that they were willing to pay, and the upfront hurdles that we're facing to get the implementation. Those were the challenges. But otherwise, I think we've certainly also seen and shown that very early on, we've built something that actually delivers value to a large number of customers.
That's awesome. I think that's a good win. But with the team, I think this is the recurring kind of theme on the podcast. All the founders are very proud of their teams, and I'm super happy to hear that. And especially if you're completely like fully remote, this is not easy. So kudos to you guys. And I don't want to ask for, the failures or mistakes because I think we've already went through like so many learnings. I don't want to call them mistakes. And I want to end this on a very positive note, but I will ask you about a hack. So it can be anything, navigating customer or investor relationship, pivoting quickly, mental health, anything that works magic for you.
I think one of the most important pieces is ask for money as soon as possible. Ask your customer for money. I think like early on, or sometimes when we didn't feel super convinced about okay, the new feature, the new product, we were like, okay, let's pilot it, let's try it. But like it doesn't add a lot of value because everyone is going to try something that's free. I think what really was important for us, and we've done that fairly early on, is even if we started a pilot or something, we've put a price tag behind it because that at least signaled to you or that someone on the other side actually sees value behind that. Very often they need to, I don't know, put their credit card down, ask their boss, ask their CFO, ask someone. So they need to get the buy-in internally. And I think that is just really, really crucial to get a sense of this. Oh, is somebody just quote unquote playing around, trying to see if there's something there, versus has to believe that there is something that can provide value for them. So I think a good advice to any founder, as soon as you have something, or maybe even before you have something, ask for money. Don't feel that that you first need to I don't know, solve 17 problems and everything needs to be perfect. Really, as soon as possible, you need to feel uncomfortable. I think it's a good signal if you feel uncomfortable asking for money, but really do that early on.
My big personal belief is founder market fit. So, there have been a lot of small hacks, a lot of small learnings during the process. And still, if you would start a new business, I'm sure that, we would learn still a lot and we would need to figure out still a lot of new things. And the way to navigate in this very difficult environment, to at least know very well the pain point and the customers, and then the only way to do it is by having some founder market fit, meaning that you build something in an environment that in the previous few years at least you have been very familiar with because you worked in that environment in one or multiple companies. And I think that's for me is key. So again, one learning for me is that it was very helpful to have the network and the knowledge from Delivery Hero, and with that this entire business operations heavy companies and industry. And once I start a new business, because it's not an if but when question, it will be definitely in an industry that I will again know very well beforehand.
Yeah, I think it's a very good one. And well, once you're there, once you're building something, happy to do it again sometime and see where you're going. But thank you so much for the story. I think, like I mentioned before, so many learnings and so many things that other founders can apply to what they're doing. And, thank you for being, yeah, very rational about it and very, upfront and transparent, because it's not an easy journey that you've had. And yeah, I really enjoyed the way you laid it out for all of us here, so thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for taking the time, Anna.
Absolutely, anytime, and take care.